I finished my first playthrough of Horizon Zero Dawn a few weeks back, and I gotta say, it's one of those games that just sticks with you, man.
Everything about that game was incredible, from the world design to the design of the mechanical creatures, the gorgeous sound design, and the character design. Well, okay, maybe not the character design. Seriously, some of those freaks are hard to look at. Why does Teb look at me like that?
In a lot of ways, Horizon Zero Dawn feels like Sony's direct response to Breath of the Wild.
In a lot of ways, this game does eclipse Breath of the Wild. The story here is very cinematic and engaging, and the visuals obviously far eclipse what can be done on a Nintendo Switch.
That's not to discount the graphics on Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, because those are just gorgeous games.
I like that the game starts you off by throwing you into the shallow end of the pool. It's still sink or swim from just the sheer amount of stuff that you can do while you're in the Embrace, but it's obviously a far cry from just how many side quests there are, as well as items to find and buy and sell and stuff to craft, upgrades to make, machines to encounter, people to meet, etc., all outside the small confines of the Embrace. Once outside of the Embrace, obviously there are main story events to follow. It's a video game, but Horizon gives you the freedom to ignore the story and just explore the world and do side quests. The freedom to dick around in a game can be what makes it fun. Half the reason it took people forever to beat the story mode in GTA 5 back in the day was because you can't stop yourself every now and then from stealing a few cars, getting chased by the police, and crashing into a gas station. In fact, with GTA 5, that pretty much just is the game for most people, with the story being the little side thing you do every now and then when you get bored of murdering random NPCs. I found the combat in this game incredibly fun. Fighting the machines is super cool. It's such an awesome idea to have the player shooting components off the machines as they battle them, which for one thing, does more damage to the machine, while also nerfing the machine's attacks or weakening its defense. With some of the machine battles later on, knocking off components becomes an absolute must if you want to survive. Every single machine design in this game is so inspired and amazing. The level of detail is fantastic. At first, my thought with the machines was that it was a bit odd that they were designed to look like real-life animals, but there's this thing in evolutionary biology known as convergent evolution, where two completely unrelated species can end up with similar body shapes or defensive strategies, or a number of other things through evolutionary pressure because those body shapes are simply the most effective at what they do. For instance, when you think of quote-unquote trees as a group of plants, that's actually a bit of a misnomer because there is no one biological group of trees. Instead, growing really tall with a trunk covered by thick fibrous bark is simply an effective survival strategy that multiple different species of plants have all convergently evolved to implement completely independently of each other. The same goes for fish. There is no one biological family of fish. The fish body plan, it just turns out it works really well for animals that live in the ocean. If you remember a few years ago, there was this meme going around that was something like, different animals keep turning into crabs and scientists don't know why. That's actually another example of convergent evolution that's so common scientists even gave it a name: carcinization. Crab body plans are just so effective for crustaceans that a bunch of different unrelated species of crustaceans have evolved to fill the niche of a crab in their respective environments multiple different times.
What was I talking about again? Oh right, Horizon Zero Dawn.
The point is, it makes sense in a way that the machines would end up with the same body plans as living animals. Well, no longer living in this timeline, but, currently living animals, given that those shapes are actually pretty well suited for their specific biological niche, a niche which is now being filled by the machines rather than the animals. Beyond that, I do wonder if there might not be better body plans, which would be impossible to do with, biological matter like bones and fleshy bits, but are more efficient and better suited to survival when you make them with metal parts. But let's not overthink this now.
Well, actually, yeah. Let's overthink that a little bit, because I think that the machines are most interesting when they do unique things that real animals don't.
For example, one of the first machines you encounter, and one that you see constantly throughout the game, is the Watcher. The whole point of a Watcher, if you couldn't guess by its name, is to watch out for threats and tell other machines if a threat is spotted to give them a chance to run away or to get the jump on attacking. From a gameplay perspective, this makes it so that you always need to be on the lookout for these guys. It also makes it so that if you need to kill some machines for parts, you need to focus on first taking out the Watchers, otherwise you're gonna have a rough time. It's also fun because they have this one big giant eye that's their weakness, so if you aim for it, manage to shoot it, you're rewarded with usually an insta-kill, which who doesn't love a well-earned insta-kill in a game? But what's so interesting about the Watchers, though, is that element of them acting as the siren for a group of machines, usually a different species of machine, which is just not something you see in nature. Yes, you absolutely see animals that exhibit what is called eusociality in real life. Think bees or ants, where they live in groups and divide labor amongst themselves, but this does not happen across species. The only reason this can happen is because these are machines where their jobs have been decided by an intelligent creator rather than by the unthinking hand of natural selection. And yeah, I know symbiosis exists where two animals kind of live in sync with each other and help each other out, but this really isn't symbiosis unless there's something, well, I guess it is a little symbiotic in a way because I believe that they collect like plant matter, the animals, you know, the machines, and then that's used to create more machines, which creates more watchers. So in a way, I guess it is a pertinent survival. I didn't consider this when I was writing the script. I still think that my point mostly applies here, where you don't see, outside of like dogs with humans, I think that's the only exception I can think of. You don't see one animal acting as like a siren for other animals, you know? That's just not something you see. It's cool is all I'll say. It's a cool thing, and I like that. And maybe it would be a bit cooler if some of the machines kind of did different body plans, you know, something that you don't see in nature. Now, to get into some of the other types of machines, there's a whole group of machines that have the build of a horse, from the broadheads to the striders. Early into the game, you actually get the ability to take these guys over and use them as a mount to get around more quickly, which is just sick.
Then there's the Stormbird, which many people are saying, most of them being me, is the scariest enemy in the entire game, and that I hate them.
Seriously, fighting these dudes sucks. I really love the design of tallnecks, with the giant bodies that are obviously heavily inspired by giraffes, but with the wild, flat heads. The way they did the Breath of the Wild style towers that unlock parts of the map here is so sick, with Aloy climbing up the tallnecks to take them over and get that information that way. Seriously, it's such an awesome and inspired idea. It feels like one of those spitball ideas that sounds it sounds great in the drawing room, you know, it sounds like a fun thing, but you realize that it isn't feasible when you go to implement it in the game. But no, they did it. They pulled it off. They made this an aspect of the game, and it's one of the coolest things. Aloy is such an interesting and cool character, and an example of a really well-written protagonist whose motivations make sense within the context of the world. It's a video game, so of course she's the chosen one. It's kind of hard to find a video game where you don't play as the chosen one, to be honest. And yes, before you type your comment, I'm sure there are thousands of stupid little indie games where you play as a henchman or a supporting character. Wow, the trope has been inverted. That's amazing. But I don't care. I don't want to get into any spoilers in this video for people who haven't played the game. Not only because spoilers suck, but also because this is genuinely one of the best stories I've ever seen in a video game. I was riveted throughout this game, and though the gameplay was fun enough to keep me coming back to it, the story did most of the work. The story is so well written and gives you just enough information to flood those dopamine centers of your brain. It holds back just enough that it creates these new questions, and it makes you think like, okay, what's going on here? I gotta play a little more. I gotta get to the next area. It's pretty interesting that the game kind of plays out episodic, like a TV show with cliffhangers at the end of an episode.
Oh yeah, by the way, Severance, man. Holy shit, what a good show. This doesn't have anything to do with Horizon. I really liked Severance.
But that's where the title of this video comes from. The writing in this game keeps you on the edge of your seat and begging for more. It is a masterpiece in anticipation and wanting to see what comes next in a way that can be really tough to accomplish, especially in a video game. It's funny that video games as a medium or art form have so many components and aspects to them that come together to form the whole, yet everyone's version of that whole, and yes, I'm spelling whole as W-H-O-L-E, not H-O-L-E, perverts. Everyone's version of that whole is different. It's kind of why the idea of video game awards is kind of stupid, because two people can play through the same game, love it equally as much as one another, but if you ask them why, it might be for completely different reasons. One may have loved the story for the visuals and the music. Great. Now you ask the other guy, he loved it for the world building, the mechanics, the gameplay, and the progression system. It's just interesting, and I know that exists in other mediums, like someone might love the score and writing of a movie, whereas somebody else loved it for the acting and the cinematography. I just think with video games, there's a higher number of parts that kind of come together to form the whole than with probably, arguably, any other medium. Rant aside, the world building is fantastic in this game. You come from this tribe of people called the Nora, who live up in the cold mountains, so they're tough folk. They still live in small villages, mostly made of wood, and they subsist off the land. Then there's another group called the Oseram, who live up in the mountains as well, but they're a bit more technologically advanced. They also have a completely separate, unique culture from the Nora. From the way they talk and act to their religion, how they dress, you would never confuse these two groups of people for one another. There's another group in the DLC expansion called the Banuk, who live in a region separated by a mountain range, and they're clearly heavily inspired by the Inuit peoples of North America. Then there's also the Karja, who themselves split off into two groups, with just the regular Karja who worship the sun, and then there's the Shadow Karja, who worship like the shadow cast by the sun, or something like that. Honestly, that part confused me a bit. Obviously, if it were real life, it would be far more complicated than that, with probably like 15 or 20 different tribes, each with multiple sub-tribes and different religions, etc., etc. But you need to keep your scope somewhat limited in a creative project, otherwise you go on an unnecessary rant about convergent evolution or the artistry of video games in your Horizon Zero Dawn review video. But the effect is that this world feels lived in and unique. It is a world that is inspired by our own, which within the game's story makes sense. However, it's had time to develop into its own thing, independent of the world that came before it, our world. It's a really cool game, and I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough. Seriously, I see so much discussion online of different game franchises, and I feel like Horizon gets mentioned, but more like it's an ancillary franchise, you know? Like, yeah, it's fun and all, but you're just playing it to kill some time before a new Naughty Dog game comes out or something. I think thinking of it that way is a mistake. This is a beautiful game full of wonders and threats. It has enough content to keep you playing for well over 100 hours if you want. There's got to be hundreds of people to meet and dozens of smaller stories within the main story to explore. There are so many weapons to mess with and ways of upgrading your weapons. You have so much freedom not only in the open world, but in the mechanics of the game, that two people could play through it in two completely different ways just based on weapon preferences. I highly recommend this game. It's an 8.5 out of 10 in my books.
And that's it. That's the video. If you liked this video, stick around. Give me a subscription. Maybe a little thumbs up. Most of the time I make low effort videos, but this is a little higher effort. I've been working on this one for a few weeks now, so every now and then you might get a good video if you subscribe. I don't know. I don't know at all. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys maybe next week with a new video. Who knows? I don't know. Bye.